Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on CBS News 24/7. I'm Lindsay Reiser. South Korean President Yoon Yeol says he will lift an emergency martial law order after he meets with his cabinet. He made the emergency declaration earlier today, accusing forces in the country's opposition party of sympathizing with North Korea. Lawmakers voted to lift the order as people demonstrated outside of the country's parliament. The National Assembly Speaker called the order invalid and said lawmakers will protect democracy with the people. Washington Post international reporter Bryan Pietsch joins us now. He was previously based in Seoul and has been following this closely. Bryan, thanks so much for joining us. Do we know why the South Korean president changed his mind? Was it pressure from the protests?
That's unclear. He didn't really say so in his remarks that just came in the last few minutes. But you did see that the National Assembly voted overwhelmingly, unanimously with the lawmakers that they could get into the building this evening to block the martial law. He said that he will lift it as soon as he's able to get a cabinet meeting together, which is expected within the next few hours. And there were also widespread protests across Seoul, but mostly outside of the National Assembly building. So you just saw a really widespread critique of this decree.
Can you recap why he made the declaration in the first place?
It came as a bit of a surprise. There had been some rumors, some rumblings that something like this might have been coming. He's faced a lot of challenges through his presidency. He was assumed office in 2022. Just last month, he had a 17% approval rating, and he's faced a lot of challenges. There was a scandal involving his wife. He doesn't have a majority in the parliament. So he had a lot of political struggles. Unclear whether this was a kind of last-ditch Hail Mary solution to try to solve those. But what analysts have been saying today is that this probably just dug him in deeper and is not really going to be the solution to his problems.
What can you tell us about the dissent in his parliament and in the streets?
Sorry, I just lost you for a second, but...
Did you hear my question?
No, about the dissent in the streets.
Yeah, and in the parliament. What can you tell us about the opposition party?
The opposition Democratic Party is the more liberal party. Yoon is from the more conservative party in South Korea. There's just been a really very sharp disagreement between the two parties. They have not been able to work together. And so what you saw out on the streets tonight outside of the National Assembly was just really an outpouring of criticism that he would do something so stark like this. You saw people actually grabbing firearms from the army that was deployed out there. Koreans love to protest, and they did so even tonight, even though it was bitterly cold past midnight. So just a lot of criticism against this move.
What are you watching for in the next few hours? As you said that he is set to meet with his cabinet and officially end this martial law. What are you watching for in the coming hours and days?
Yeah, so he said that he will lift the martial law that he had imposed just hours ago. Would be quite incredible if he reneged on that. Assuming that the cabinet meeting goes to plan. I think when markets open in Seoul this morning, it'll be really interesting to see what the reaction is. The Korean won has fallen against the US dollar. Korean stocks traded in the US have fallen. Korea is really seen as, it's not the oldest democracy around, it's not the youngest one, but I think this was unexpected. I think people thought that Korea was past its plight with dictatorships. So I think it'll be interesting to see how and whether Yoon is able to escape this politically. It really looks like, according to analysts, that he might not be able to. We'll see what he says in the following days. But what I've seen from experts and people who really monitor this closely is that there's no way that he escapes this and remains in power through the end of his 5-year term.
How do you see this impacting the country's relationship with the U.S.?
Yeah, so an interesting thing about Yoon is that he has moved farther than his predecessors, taking a more harsher line against North Korea, and he's moved to more closely align Seoul with Washington and Tokyo, especially militarily, with the threat from North Korea, you saw statements from the United States today that they were deeply concerned about what was going on in Seoul today, quite caught off guard. The U.S. said that they were not informed of this ahead of time. And so I think it'll be interesting to see whether that concern from Washington, whether those fears are able to be quelled with Yoon still in office, if the presidency in South Korea changes, how those fears may remain.
Should the U.S. send out any kind of forceful statement? What should the U.S. say?
The U.S. has said, President Biden was asked about this as he was making remarks in Angola, and he said that he was just briefed on the matter. Quite curious to see what the U.S. will say about it, but what the U.S. has said so far is just that they're very concerned about it. Korea is a very close ally for the U.S. There's a large U.S. military presence in South Korea, so it remains to be seen how the U.S. will respond to this. I think there's been a lot of just waiting to see what Yoon would say following the parliamentary vote.
Our own Sam Vinograd had said that this really caught U.S. leaders and likely global leaders by surprise. Does your reporting match that this really sort of, this declaration of martial law? I mean, you mentioned that there may be sort of a feeling that it was coming, but the fact that it happened today under these circumstances, did that seem to come as a surprise to world leaders?
It did. You saw there's some warnings issued by embassies today. I had not seen those previously, basically telling their citizens to not join public protests, I think China was telling its citizens not to make unnecessary journeys outside of their homes. I think this caught a lot of countries, a lot of leaders off guard. Despite there being some rumblings that something like this might happen, I think most people just probably thought it was unfathomable that he would do something like this. And I think a lot of people saw it as maybe kind of out of the realm of possibility, but obviously it came to fruition, albeit quite briefly.
I know that I had asked you what you're going to be watching for in the next few hours, but is there any indication that we could see arrests of people who continue to protest in the streets?
So President Yoon has said that he has withdrawn the troops. There were some clashes between troops, police, protesters, people out on the street, especially outside of the National Assembly. Although the martial law was quite clear and quite expansive about the amount of the types of crimes that could be prosecuted or could be arrests could be made for under this, I haven't seen that there were widespread arrests. It's unclear, possibly there were on a smaller scale, but everything was just so fast moving. I think it was unclear how this martial law was even going to be carried out. It basically was put into effect and then almost withdrawn as quickly as it was put into place. Unclear if that would happen, but there, you saw widespread protests. Even the media was put under martial law. Kind of unclear what that exactly means. But Korea has a robust free press. There were journalists out there covering it, but I have not seen widespread arrests. And I would imagine that in the coming hours, with the military presence kind of winding down and drying down, arrests might be unlikely in the coming hours.
And you mentioned it's kind of unclear what the martial law for the media meant, but can you sort of reiterate for our viewers what the martial law did entail in South Korea, or does, since I guess it hasn't technically been lifted?
There were about 6 points in the martial law that were issued. Some of them were quite vague. One of them was a little bit more specific about the media, saying that the media was under martial law. Another one took point at the doctor strike that's been kind of roiling in South Korea recently. And so that has become a large political issue for President Yoon. And as part of the martial law, he ordered all medical workers who have been striking to go back to work within 48 hours or face punishment. Punishment was defined under martial law with arrests, seizure, search without a warrant under martial law. Quite expansive. Some of them were quite unclear, but it was put into effect and then seems to be withdrawn possibly in the next coming hours. So unclear whether any of it actually will have been enforced at all.
I know that there is still so much unknown, but is there any indication that we could see another about face in the coming days or weeks?
I guess as we saw tonight, that anything is possible. I think he's really lacking the political backing here to renege, to try something like this again. You see people in his own conservative party turning against him, kind of losing faith. He's losing support. It looks like his political backing might kind of be falling apart from this move. Then again, anything is possible. I'm not sure what kind of a political situation would arise if he did so. But it seems to be that he is backing down in the face of widespread protest, the outcry, and of course the overwhelming vote in the National Assembly.
Bryan, you had mentioned that you're going to be watching when the markets open to see how they impacted the South Korean financial markets. Do you expect that if there is a significant drop, that could affect global markets?
It's possible. I mean, if you look at the Korean companies, Korea has these large conglomerates. Hyundai, the car company, also has department stores. Samsung, the electronics company, also has a car brand, insurance. So these are huge companies that could potentially be affected. The company Coupang, which is Korean's answer to Amazon, the fast shipping of products there, used it a lot when I lived there. It's actually traded on the New York Stock Exchange because it's headquartered in Seattle. That was down about 4 or 5% today. Unclear when the Korean markets open if there would be a similar response because you had the pending withdrawal of the martial law.
Bryan Pietsch, we really appreciate you covering so much ground with us. Thank you for your time.